Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna say.
Hey, all you citizens of the world, welcome back to the second segment of Live from the Heartland for the week of February 24th. And yesterday I had a visitor came over to my house, a longtime friend, Andy Pierce, and turns out he was looking for some postcards that I put out way back of Chicago jazz people, including one Fred Anderson. And Fred Anderson is a legendary figure in Chicago's music history, the late, great Fred Anderson. And I asked Andy, who it turns out now has a jazz show at midnight on WDCB. That's the College of DuPage's broadcasting setup. They're at 90.9 FM, and he's on at midnight with a neat show. So I asked him to come on the show. How are you, Andy?
I'm well, Michael. Thanks for having me.
You look like you're all set to broadcast over there. Is that your hair or your earphones on? I can't tell.
It's probably what's left of hair and ears.
I should make the picture bigger. Well, it was good to see you. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on around Fred Anderson and the late, great, not only late, great Fred Anderson, but the late, great Velvet Lounge.
Hey, thanks, Michael. I stopped by because you have one of the few postcards that were ever made of Fred. There are a couple other out there. I know University of Massachusetts had a jazz series. I think they had a postcard of him, maybe the Vision Festival in New York. But that photo from Lauren Deutsch that you printed in a series of jazz cards is really fantastic. And it's really it's Fred before a lot of us knew Fred. You know, you kind of had to be in the know. I think that was a loft party he was playing then. He might have already had his Birdhouse Club on North Lincoln Avenue across from where the Old Town School is today. But he hadn't risen to the prominence that we knew him for in the 80s, 90s, 2000s when he had the Velvet Lounge. And that was his club on 22nd and Indiana that he had for a long time before he had to move it over to Cermak when they built a condo tower on that site. For those unfamiliar with Fred, you know, he's a jazz saxophone player and composer who was really, as it's said in this album, he was really the missing link, you know, somewhere between bebop and the avant-garde. A lot of what he did was self-taught. He had his own method for playing music and playing through the keys and playing through different things he wanted to do. If you listen to him, there are compositions. So we're going to celebrate him on his birthday this year, Saturday, March 23rd. Greg Ward is going to play some of his compositions. So we're celebrating Fred Anderson, the composer, at Constellation.
Was that the picture? Was that picture on that cover of Lauren's picture too?
It is. It is.
Yeah. That's the same as the postcard. You know, you mentioned this postcard series. It was Heartland music cards we put out of the Heartland Cafe. But I was really glad that you remembered that not only that photo, but that whole series of cards, because they're a lot of fun and they are available at the Buddy store at the Cultural Center.
Sure.
And I know you're going to use them at this event, so that's good.
Yeah, it's nice to get them out there. You never know how somebody's going to get turned on to something. You know, you having those on the spinner at the Heartland store all those years, people probably picked them up and then they wondered about the music, you know, behind the person.
Let's hope
I know
so.
I had that postcard hanging in my cube at City Hall when I really got to know Fred, when he came in for his occupancy placard. And, you know, I'm looking at the postcard on the cube wall and I'm hearing his voice at the front desk, right? And that was kind of a moment when we connected.
I remember Fred when he came to the Heartland and he played along with Hamid Drake and the great Charlie Hayden, Liberation Music Orchestra. And it was a benefit for the Nicaragua Solidarity Committee. And I think the film Fire from the Mountain. It was a great event. I do have a number of photos of Fred and Hamid and Hayden eating at the Heartland. Not all of them the greatest expression, or focus, but I do have the documentation.
Action
Let me
shots
ask you a little
at
bit
the
about
table.
your own involvement in music. How did you become a jazz fan? Uh, I didn't know that when I first knew you, and I haven't seen you for a while, but I've been following you on Facebook, etc. And I know you're deep into the music these days.
You know, I had a neighbor who played organ and played spoons, you know, uh,
Spoons, right?
spoons. That's probably where I probably heard some of the first standards and jazz. Then at some point in a discount bin at a Karma Records, I saw an Anthony Braxton CD, and he was playing a contrabass clarinet, which, you know, I think I knew from band, but I'd never really seen one played in a jazz context. So that kind of got my interest. And then a high school girlfriend introduced me to the Velvet Lounge, and I'm pretty sure that I picked up the first CD Tatsu Aoki and Fred did together as a giveaway on WNUR. You know, it was like, here's a new CD release, come to the bop shop. And that's kind of where I got hooked.
How old were you?
Uh in my early 20s after I moved to
Wow.
Chicago around 95, 96.
Yeah, I first started going to jazz shows. I used to go to the Village Vanguard and various places in New York in the late 50s. I went to Town Hall. I mean, I got to see, Cannonball Adderley. I got to see John Coltrane. I got to see Miles Davis. And who would know that later in my life I'd be running musical joints up here in Rogers Park for a while that would have the likes of Hamid Drake and Fred Anderson and Charlie Hayden, Tatsuo Aoki, Nicole Mitchell, um, you know, Boykin, all kind of people. Uh,
You might
I
even
really
name,
liked doing it, and I liked having the music play and like listening to jazz still. Um, what you got going with your radio show? That's a new
so I,
thing. I didn't know that till yesterday.
yeah, the show's a couple years old now, and it airs each Sunday night at midnight on WDCB 90.9 FM and WDCB.org. You can also stream it anytime through the 2 week archive. And I have the pleasure of being able to play creative music and avant-garde music without limitation, you know, through the canon of everything that's happened the last 50, 60 years plus new music. And it's a real treasure.
How did WDCB end up becoming an all jazz station? I mean, it's a college connected station, right? College of DuPage. And
It is. I, you know, I am not the historian or authority on that at all, Michael, but I believe they, for a long time, had a variety of music. And I think when it came that there weren't other stations that had jazz and blues, that it more and more became more jazz and blues to where it's now 24/7 jazz blues. And then we also have Americana, folk, and other things on the weeknights. But I think as other stations went over to other formats in Chicago, I think they just picked up more jazz and blues. They also picked up more jazz and blues DJs. You know, all of these shows are curated by local people who know the music, know the scene, and a lot of them have experience at other stations.
do you do your show from your house or do you go to the station?
I do it at the station.
Uh-huh. And you bring your records with you or your
Yes, and
CDs?
I draw from the library here, and then also, you know, some personal things. A lot of artists are sharing things electronically, so it's, you know, it's doing your homework ahead of time to download the files and be ready.
Well, speaking of homework, how do you do the homework and decide on what you're going to do on the show? I know for me doing this weekly show, it's a lot of thinking about contacting people, all that. You have to figure out what albums you're going to play, what tunes you're going to play, what artists you're going to profile. How much time do you put into that and share your experience doing it?
That's a good question. It's sometimes birthdays, sometimes anniversaries. I know for March I will play all Fred Anderson, and there's a whole lot of Fred Anderson to draw from. You know, early, late, duets, big ensembles, tributes to. You know, I could play a year of Fred Anderson if you wanted that, but March will be Fred Anderson. I try to focus, Michael, between things that haven't gotten a lot of play players that maybe have faded from the common knowledge, and definitely a big focus on Chicago. I'll give you an example. There was a band that you had once or twice called Samana. It was the first all-female AACM group ever. Their CD is very hard to find. You can't buy it. No amount of money can you find that CD. But I was able to find the tracks and play those. And that's kind of strange because that was the 90s, right? You wouldn't think it would be that hard to find. But it was rewarding to find that group, which included Nicole Mitchell, and to be able to play those on air again.
That's good. Now, you've mentioned AACM a few times. So they got a long history. You want to share a little bit of that? People who are jazz fans know it. Others who are new to the jazz scene may not know it. It's really a wonderful part of Chicago music legend.
It is. And again, that's something I'm not the authority on, but starting in the early 60s with some of the founders here in Chicago, the Association for the Advancement of Creative Musicians, not for the creative music, but for the advancement of those individual creative musicians. Fred played in one of those first concerts and was certainly associated with it through his lifetime. And there's a New York branch. There's a great book on it by George Lewis, if you want to read the history of the AACM. And a lot of the young players that we follow today are members. It is a collective that supports their music.
Talking with Andy Pierce. He is the host of a jazz show
called Another Place,
and that airs at midnight on WDCB 90.9 FM. And you can also get it online, right?
At WDCB.org.
Let's talk a little bit about some other people that we've mentioned here. Let's start with that photographer, Lauren Deutsch, who took the picture of Fred Anderson that was on the postcard I put out and on the jazz cover that you held up. Lauren she was my student at Columbia College, got involved in a lot of political things on the progressive end of things, and became head of the Jazz Institute for many years. You tell us a little bit about Lauren.
Lauren's a great fan of the music and documentarian. You know, her photos of the last, we'll say, decades capture music and musicians that largely went undocumented. And her more recent work of capturing movement and light and sound in her photography is really groundbreaking. If you look up Lauren Deutsch, you will see some of her work. And I believe she is planning an installation to incorporate music and images that'll be coming up soon at Tatsu Aoki's new venue. It's the Asian Improv Midwest out on Elston Avenue. It's their dojo for the taiko drumming.
I didn't know he had a new place. I did hear him on WZRD one time being interviewed, and I know there was something going on, but he actually has a club now, huh?
He does. It's on Elston, just southeast of Cicero.
And the name of it again?
Asian Improv Arts Midwest.
Okay, I like that. Well, Tatsu Aoki is another jazz player. Maybe you want to tell us a little about him. You know more about him than I do. I know he came to the Heartland and played a couple of times, and I do have a picture of him,
And
which I'll find.
Tatsu's been telling his story pretty well recently. He is an Asian American musician who came here from Japan with a great admiration for punk rock music and also a little bit of history of jazz from his family and growing up. He came to this music and incorporated not only American jazz, but some of the traditional Japanese music and instruments that he knew. He has been playing and recording with Fred and other AACM players and other local players now for 3 or more decades, and just a great teacher and mentor to not only young musicians, but also film students as he teaches film at the Art Institute.
Jazz. We like jazz. We had a series, which you probably attended some of back at the No Exit, back when we owned the No Exit in the Heartland. A fellow named William Perry, who has passed away, saxophone player, he approached us and asked if we could do a Sunday afternoon jazz set. And we did. And, he brought in Hamid Drake, and he brought in Nicole Mitchell, David Boykin, and I'm blocking the name of the trumpet player that
Billy Brimfield.
Billy Brimfield, also the late great Billy Brimfield. Tell us a little about some of those people. Let's start with Hamid. Hamid has gotten a lot of recognition. He plays around the world. He's a warm and wonderful guy. He used to eat at the Heartland all the time, and he's out there working away still.
He is. And I think in the last year, he did a lot of touring with David Murray. Hamid's just in demand everywhere in the world. People want to play and record with him. And, he and Fred were both born in Monroe, Louisiana. Both of them of different generations came to Evanston, Illinois as children. They played together very early on. And you mentioned William Perry. William Perry kind of came up under Fred. William was from Evanston as well. Really great saxophone player and composer. I've had to look really hard to find some of his work, but I do have some recordings with him.
Oh, I'd love to hear those, because all I remember, I don't know if we recorded anything over there or not. We'll see. There's a lot of archives at this end, but he was a wonderful guy. And Brimfield too.
Yeah, and Brimfield in late life had a couple CDs that I've found. They're not easily available, but he did have a couple CDs toward the end of his life, still playing very well. We have a lot of archival material with Billy and Hamid and Fred that we've donated to the Experimental Sound Studio Creative Archive. It's the Creative Audio Archive. That's over on Ravenswood. And so that's a place where these things are being digitized and preserved. Those VHS tapes and those old audio tapes weren't going to last forever. So this is an opportunity to kind of get those things safe. So that was kind of a COVID project for me, was getting that stuff out of the closet and over there to get digitized.
I'm going to keep working off these people that came and played at the Heartland and the No Exit. Let's talk about Nicole Mitchell, because she was there along with David Boykin. I think they were married at one time. I remember one of them had a daughter there that was listening to the music a whole lot. Nicole has gone on to get a lot of notoriety. You know more about the current state of the jazz world, so tell us what you know about Nicole Mitchell.
She's in North Carolina now, and she's very much in demand across the world, playing, teaching. She's published a book, and she is, one of the top players associated with Chicago and Fred and the Velvet of my generation, right? And she is now the mentor or the elder to the next generation. if you see Nicole listed in Chicago, you got to catch her because she's here 2, 3, 4 times a year. But we don't have the embarrassment of riches that we had when she was here all of the time. Her recordings with her band Black Earth Ensemble are some of the best recent work of Delmark. And you can also see videos that she shot for Delmark, like at the New Velvet. So Josh Abrams, you mentioned David, those are all great players of my generation.
Well, someone who was a great promoter of jazz, who is no longer with us, but he ran the jazz showcase, is Joe Siegel.
Yeah.
And I remember, Joe Siegel was an important figure. You want to talk about his legacy a little bit?
You know, Joe certainly beat everybody in endurance, right? And he somehow knew how to survive. I mean, how many different locations did the showcase have? How many fundraisers? How many, efforts for people that he did? And Wayne has carried on very, very well. Any business that has survived the pandemic and is still here to talk about is worth celebrating, and that's certainly the Jazz Showcase. And they've been open to all kinds of jazz, right? It's not just the straight ahead. I know when Fred was...
Wait, so the Jazz Showcase is still going on?
It is.
And who's running it now?
Wayne Siegel, Joe's son.
Oh, his kid.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I didn't realize that. And why don't you take this opportunity to talk about places people can go hear jazz in Chicago? You've mentioned a couple. You probably know a lot more than I do. And I'd love to hear, because I'm in my old age, I'm starting to go out again at night.
Good. So to make sure I don't leave anyone out, I'm going to refer people to the jazz calendar at WDCB.org. That jazz calendar is free and open to everyone. And you can search by day there. You can search by venue. We also have a community calendar where you can search all those events, because as sure as I'm going to list some, and I will try, I'm going to leave somebody out. For the straight ahead, you want to go to the Showcase, Green Mill, Winters Jazz Club, and I'm probably and Andy's. And I'm probably forgetting 2 or 3, 4 or 5.
Well, let me throw in Le Piano, which is right here in Rogers.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Which took over once we sold the Heartland Cafe, the next owner sold the No Exit off, and it's now Le Piano, and they're doing jazz in there. One of the people we haven't talked about, and we'll use it as our finale for this segment, Andy, is the late, great Phil Coran. And, he used to, in his older years, he came to the Heartland a lot. He lived in the neighborhood. He was a very demanding and finicky guy in many ways, but also shared so many great moments, and it was a pleasure to be around. I was glad we could feed him.
Phil was a teacher and performer and composer at another level. And I feel that those early members and founders of the AECM, they played creative music from the point that they were master musicians to begin with. They weren't playing outside because they didn't know the inside, or they didn't know classical composition or playing. They played it from a point of great knowledge and education and ability, and they were composing or improvising something new. His work with his big bands and his work through his theater that he had on the South Side are just unmatched. So find his recordings and listen to them, because they are just some of the best work done in Chicago.
Andy Pierce, it was great to run into you yesterday. It was great to have you on the show today. You are piquing my interest. Maybe when you are going out to hear some music, let me know. I look for a ride. I go with you. I want to encourage everybody to check out your show. It's called Another Place. It's on WDCB 90.9 at midnight on Sundays. There it is. And we'll have you back.
Thanks, Michael.
If you've got some good news, let me know. We're ready to have you.
Come on out to hear the Greg Ward Quartet. I wanted to tell you that lineup. 8 p.m. Saturday, March 23rd at Constellation. They're playing Fred Anderson compositions. You got Greg Ward on alto sax, Justin Dillard on piano, Ethan Fillion on bass, and Isaiah Spencer on drums. Come on out, 8 o'clock.
That's at the Constellation at 3111 Northwestern Avenue.
Yes.
A great place. I've been there. Okay,
See,
everybody.
see you there.
Thank you very much, Andy. And I'm going to